In March 2016, the funeral of Ho Tzu-dung, one of the most prominent 14K Triad leaders in Hong Kong, became a major public event. That afternoon, outside the World Funeral Home in Hung Hom, an enormous crowd gathered. Among the mourners were not only senior figures from numerous Hong Kong triads, but also celebrities from the entertainment industry. What caught the most attention, however, was the heavy police presence. Hundreds of officers were deployed to the scene to maintain order. An extraordinary sight for the funeral of a criminal kingpin. Why would the death of a triad boss require such a massive police operation, to the point of essentially providing protection for his funeral? To unswear that, we must go back to the story of Ho Tzu-dung's entry into the underworld. Ho Tzu-dung's real name was Fan Chi-dung, Poon Chi-dung, and he was originally from Foshan, Guangdong. Unlike most triad members, who typically came from poor or broken families and drifted into crime out of desperation, Fan Chi-dung was born into a wealthy landlord family. However, by the time he was born, the Kuomintang Nationalist Party was collapsing. Fearing political purges, his father fled with the family to Hong Kong on the eve of China's Liberation Day, carrying baby Dung in his arms. Although they had to start over from scratch, Dung's father was a savvy businessman. The family rebuilt their lives successfully in Hong Kong and lived comfortably. From a young age, Dung showed exceptional intelligence and academic ability, consistently ranking among the top students in his class. His father had high hopes for him. After finishing elementary school, Dung was enrolled in an English-language secondary school near their home. His father dreamed that one day his son would bring honor to the family. However, the education at that English school was conducted almost entirely in English, with little to no Chinese used. Dung, who could barely speak or understand English at the time, struggled immensely. To make matters worse, most of his classmates came from wealthy backgrounds. By comparison, despite his family as a decent life, Dung appeared less affluent. This social gap made him the target of ridicule. Classmates often mocked him as a country bumpkin. The prolonged pressure and humiliation hardened his personality. Dung became increasingly aggressive, and fighting quickly became his way of releasing pent-up frustration. During this period, Hong Kong society was undergoing major upheavals. Gangs were sprouting like mushrooms across the city. Although police existed, many were deeply entangled with organized crime. There was even a common saying at the time: the police control the gangs, and the gangs control public security. In fact, quite a number of police officers were themselves triad members. As a result, joining a gang became a trend among young men who wanted power, protection, or status. Dung, being naturally combative and ambitious, dreamed of joining a powerful triad and one day becoming a legendary boss. At the age of 15, Dung started hanging out with friends who had ties to the underworld. Through them, he was introduced to the 14K Triad, one of the most powerful and feared gangs in Hong Kong at the time. He joined the organization, starting at the lowest ranks, performing menial tasks like street extortion and intimidation to earn small amounts of money. The 17 Dung had a son with his girlfriend. For a brief moment, he considered quitting gang life at her urging, but the timing was terrible. Hong Kong's economy was hit hard by a stock market crash, causing widespread factory closures. Job opportunities were scarce, especially for someone like Dung, who had no formal qualifications. Disappointed and frustrated, he returned to the triad world. Disputes in those days were rarely taken to the police. Conflicts were settled through fights. Whoever was stronger won. Driven by his ambition to rise to the top, Dung trained in martial arts such as Sanda, Chinese kickboxing, and other combat techniques. He began recruiting his own followers, carefully building up his image as a fearsome young boss. To enhance his imposing presence, he grew a beard, earning him the street name Ho Tzu-dung, literally Bearded Dung. Before long, his influence grew rapidly, and he became one of the gang's rising leaders. His name began to spread throughout Hong Kong's underworld. Many other gangs, wary of his growing power, proactively formed alliances with him to fight common rivals. One of the defining moments in Ho Tzu-dung's rise was his bold takeover of Portland Street, known in Vietnamese as Bot Lam, a notorious underground red light district in Hong Kong, located between Mong Kok and U Ma Thi. This area was infamous, not only for prostitution but also as a major hub for drug trafficking. It was a place of pleasure and vice, where all kinds of people, gangsters, businessmen, addicts, and sex workers intertwined. Originally, Portland Street was controlled by Tsz-yung, a powerful rival triad. But Dung had long set his sights on the enormous profits that came from controlling this territory. After a series of brutal gang battles, he finally managed to seize control of the area. From then on, every drug dealer, brothel owner, and underground casino operator had to pay a monthly tribute. By this time, Dung commanded hundreds of followers and became the head of the E-group Q-Bang within 14K. But society in Hong Kong was also changing rapidly. In 1974, Hong Kong established the Independent Commission Against Corruption, ICAC, to fight rampant corruption. Many police officers who had colluded with triads were investigated and purged, and numerous underworld figures were arrested. Law and order improved dramatically, and as a result, the golden age of the triads began to fade. Although Dung had been in the gang world for years, he had not yet made a name for himself through a truly legendary act. That is, until 1975, when a violent showdown changed everything. At the time, a mahjong parlor in Kowloon, near Mung Kok, was being extorted by the Tsz-yung gang, a notoriously cruel criminal group from mainland China. Local gangs were too afraid to intervene. Dung saw this as a perfect opportunity to make his mark. He approached the owner and promised to protect the establishment. The owner, with no better options, reluctantly agreed. The deal was that if Dung could drive off the Tsz-yung gang, he and his men would receive 7,500 Hong Kong dollars per month, along with a daily meal and a pack of cigarettes. Dung then ordered the owner to replace the front door with an electric gate and stock up on 30 machetes. He gathered his men and waited. On the predicted Saturday night, the Tsz-yung gang showed up to cause trouble. Dung immediately activated the electric gate, trapping them inside. Then, with his men, armed with machetes, he charged at the intruders. The fight was vicious and bloody. Within moments, blood covered the floor. The Tsz-yung gang members suffered heavy casualties and begged for mercy. Only then did Dung order his men to stop. The Tsz-yung gang never returned. Overnight, Dung became famous throughout the Hong Kong underworld for this single, decisive victory. Riding on this momentum, he expanded his territory, battling rival groups and seizing control of mahjong parlors, drug dens, and nightclubs throughout the area. His ruthlessness and audacity made other gangs seethe with hatred. Some even harassed him with late-night threatening calls, swearing to take revenge. Dung's response was fearless and chilling. "As long as I'm not chopped to death, I'll hunt you down to the end." Dung soon realized that the golden age of triads was fading, and he needed to adapt. In the early 1980s, Hong Kong's film industry was booming. Movies were breaking box office records, generating enormous profits. Many gangs began investing in films as a way to launder money and legitimize their business, while also profiting from production. Dung decided to follow suit. He invested in Fu Arts Film Company, founded by Tsz-yung, a former gang member who had reinvented himself as a film producer. Because they had known each other for years, Dung became a shareholder in the company. However, lacking expertise in film production, he left all dealings with actors to Tsz-yung. Like many gang-backed companies at the time, Tsz-yung would strong-arm celebrities, forcing them to act in their films at low fees. If actors refused, Dung would send his men to threaten or abduct them. A notorious example was actress Karina Lau. When she hesitated to show up for filming, Tsz-yung reported it to Dung. His men kidnapped her, stripped her naked for threatening photos, and forced her to appear on set. Despite the fear, Tsz-yung humiliated her by giving her a minor background role, sidelining her quickly in the movie. Meanwhile, Jet Li was in a contract dispute with his former company. Tsz-yung intervened, helping Jet Li resolve the issue, which led to Jet Li signing with Fu Arts Film. Jet Li was the most popular male star at the time. Any film with him was almost guaranteed to be a box office hit. Naturally, rival gangs also wanted control. Chan Chi-ming, a member of the Tsz-yung triad, once pointed a gun at Tsz-yung, declaring he wanted to take Jet Li. Dung arranged a meeting at a hotel to smooth things over. But when Chan arrived, Tsz-yung slammed the table and shouted, "Who do you think you are?" Chan, hot-headed, shouted back. Within seconds, both men drew their guns, pointing them at each other's heads. Dung quickly stepped in to prevent a shootout, telling them to calm down. The confrontation ended without gunfire, but left deep tensions. Not long after, Tsz-yung was shot dead outside his office, and Chiang Chi-ming vanished from the underworld. This failure marked Dung's withdrawal from the film industry. He decided not to get involved in businesses he didn't understand. By the late 1980s, Ho Tu-dung had set his sights on Macau, notorious for its underground gambling scene. Dung was already a heavy gambler who frequented Macau's casinos. Over time, he built relationships with powerful local triad leaders like Mo Ding-ping, Ku Fo Vai, and the NG Sakyu gang. In 1988, confident and ambitious, he led a group of followers across the sea to Macau, determined to carve out a share of the profits. But shortly after his arrival, Macau's casinos introduced chip runners, intermediaries who brought clients and earned massive commissions. This new system triggered violent rivalries among triads. Soon, bombings, AK-47 shootouts, and street assassinations became common in Macau. Dung fought several bloody battles, but failed to secure a foothold, eventually retreating back to Tsim Sha Tsui, Hong Kong. By the early 2000s, Dung's business ventures found success with 348 Disco, one of Hong Kong's first major nightclubs. It became a hotspot for youth, generating huge profits from drink sales and ecstasy trafficking. He opened 2 more branches in Shenzhen and Zhuhai, but mainland police raids forced both to shut down. In one dramatic raid, police stormed in with submachine guns, forcing Dung to strip off his jacket, face the wall and squat as they searched the club. Shaken, he realized mainland authorities were far tougher than Hong Kong police and retreated home. Back in Hong Kong, 348 Disco thrived financially but drew too much police attention due to frequent fights and drug use. When its license expired, authorities refused renewal, effectively shutting down his last empire. In 2007, Dung was arrested during a gang gathering. Undercover police had collected evidence, and he openly admitted being a triad leader. He received a 1-year prison sentence. But this was after 2005, when he'd been diagnosed with cancer and had started chemotherapy. Prison life was harsh, treatment was restricted, and the illness wore him down. The once hot-headed fighter grew calm and reflective, often sighing. Times have changed. He noted how fights no longer earned respect and how police now targeted entire groups, not just individuals. After his release, he abandoned fighting, often acting as a mediator between gangs, earning wide respect. His birthday parties became legendary gang summits, attended by major triad figures, who came to pay their respects. In 2016, at 68 Ho Tu-dung passed away at Tuan Mun Hospital, having witnessed and shaped half a century of triad history. His funeral was grand and heavily policed. Despite his criminal past, the Hong Kong police deployed hundreds of officers to maintain order, both out of respect for his relationships with authorities and to prevent gang violence. In Hawaii, the police presence was a final escort for a man who had been both a feared boss and a strategic elder in Hong Kong's changing underworld. The life of Ho Tu-dung reflects the rise and decline of Hong Kong's triads, from youthful rebellion and gang wars to business ventures, criminal empires, and eventual transformation. His story is not just about crime. It's also a mirror of Hong Kong's evolving society over decades of turbulence, corruption, reform, and globalization. What do you think about Ho Tu-dung's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping stories from the hidden corners of history. Thank you for reading. See you next time.